I'm going to talk a little bit about different kinds of data. A lot of the earlier part of the conference revolved around techniques, and this is going to revolve around types of data. The data that you are mostly familiar with is data that comes out of medical studies. And the randomized controlled trial is thought to be the pinnacle. But actually, the randomized controlled trial is a single snapshot of a single entity at a single point in time. So it's very much like an assembled family photograph. So you'll see everybody's faces there, but you won't have any insight into personality. You won't have any insight as to what was going on after the photograph or what went on before the photograph. Whereas with registries, it's more like a GoPro. It takes in the heterogeneity of all of that's going on, both the things that are going on above the surface, the things that are going on below the surface. It brings in real-time data, and that data constantly informs and feeds back into the registry. So you have the ability to see points in time repetitively. And as things advance and progress, you see the effect of the advancement and the progression. Whereas the randomized controlled trial is closed. When it's closed, that amount of knowledge is fixed, and any knowledge moving forward from it needs another randomized controlled trial. Registries are different that way. So registries are actually ideally suited to socialized economies. So registries were given birth and had a great deal of impact in the Swedish societies, and they have the longest track record there. The capitalist economic system we work in makes registries more difficult, but they can still be accomplished. And so we're going to go into a little bit of what registry accomplishments look like, because it's very impactful and it's very impressive. It's good to understand, why was the registry built? Because if you know why something occurred, you'll have a better understanding of its meaning, its purpose. So they can be built for quality improvement, continuous quality improvement. In the state of Washington, there are a series of registries that were built for continuous quality improvement, and they're called the SCOPE registries. That's SCOAP, Surgical Care Outcome Assessment Program. And the general surgery SCOPE module has about 135 to 150,000 patients in tracking. So that's a huge volume. The spine SCOPE registry has about 70 to 80,000 patients in 2-year surveillance. So you learn quite a bit from urology, vascular surgery. You learn quite a bit, OBGYN. You will learn a lot about the practice of medicine from registry. But you can also do it for regulatory purposes. So you'll see an example in the slides here that a regulatory payer came to a registry expertise company and said, we need evidence around the treatments that we pay for so that we can provide coverage decisions for those treatments that you all do, vertebral compression fracture treatments specifically. But it also gave them evidence that what they were paying for was helping. So you need to understand what the objectives are. And then, like the folks in this room, if you get young minds together around a topic, like I was saying yesterday, and what Margaret Mead's comment was, a small group of highly motivated people who are committed, in fact, can change the world. In fact, that's how change does occur, is from a small group of highly motivated, committed people. So, in registry and in practice of medicine, you have 6 major stakeholder groups, and they all begin with P. So you have patients, you have physicians, you have payers, you have purchasers. Your purchasers are your Microsofts, your Amazons, your Boeings, your General Motors. The purchasers are large employers who purchase healthcare for their employees. And you have policymakers, they're called legislators, mostly they're attorneys, but anyway, they're legislators, policymakers, and you have product or device manufacturers, and you can put pharma in that group. So these are your stakeholders, and the literature and research that you generate impacts all of them. So if you do population research, which is what registries do, you can change policy, you can change industry, you can change practice of medicine, and if your primary motivation is the care of the patient, if that first P remains the center around which you revolve, the patient, you'll genuinely impact the folks you take care of in a real positive way. In the present milieu that we will practice, and you will live your entire practice lifetime in that milieu, you'll hear this buzzword of value-based healthcare. It presently does not exist. Anyone who tells you that it does is blowing smoke up your pants or your dress, but that's where we're going. And when you unify the database around clinical practice of medicine, so safety, quality, efficacy issues, how you take care of patients, process of care issues, and you unify that database around with the business metrics of how much did it cost to produce that beneficial impact for that patient, then you have the cost over the quality equation. You can talk about value-based healthcare. And that's what all of our purchasers want. They want to know, how much is it going to cost for my 65,000 Amazonian employees? How quickly will they get back to work? And are you able to predict? Because they will not continue to put up with 14 to 20% increase in healthcare costs with no impact on their ability to predict. Because they have to predict who's coming back to work tomorrow morning in order to produce the widgets that they produce, or the Apple iPhones that they produce, or the Amazon products that they deliver by their drone to your front door. They have to be able to predict. And so we as healthcare professionals are going to have to deliver on that. And this is one of the ways you do it. Registry data will do it. Like the Strada bicycle app, registries tell you where you've been, where you are headed, what changes you might need to make in order to anticipate the hills that are out in front of you, where you can marshal your energy for the next challenge that sits in front of you, and they tell you where you are at this point of time and where the finish line is, so that you can understand how to get there. So registries are hugely impactful. They are not those snapshots of a portrait at one place in time in the practice of interventional pain management. They are the continuum of how we improve interventional pain management across all forms of treatment for the enormous spectrum of patients that we see. Because the randomized controlled trial has to have only a certain patient with only a certain condition who's getting only one of two treatments. The registry says we embrace the heterogeneity of all patients who have similar conditions. We embrace the heterogeneity of all types of practice that will attempt to treat those conditions. And we want universal enrollment for every single patient to be followed by the physician-identified metrics that mark improvement. And so essentially, no matter how they're treated, no matter when they're treated, they all get measured for baseline and time intervals so that you can prove and predict what works and what doesn't work. And basically, you do that by this very important thing, this Hawthorne effect. You change physician behavior around Hawthorne effect. Essentially, if you shine a light in a room, Imagine it's the room that you're walking through tonight to get to the bathroom, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. If you shine a light in that room, you're not likely to kick any of the furniture, so your big toe is not going to hurt. You're not likely to kick any of the coffee table, so your shin is not going to hurt. And you're very likely to get to the destination. And what you do when you shine a light in the medical arena is you cause folks who want to go their own way, cowboys as it might be, to stop and consider that their way will now be shown to everyone. You cause folks who are delivering high quality care to be particularly meticulous about what they do because a light is being shined on them and the outcomes are going to be shown to everyone. And by just the Hawthorne effect, behaviors improve around compliance. You will precisely do your spinal cord stimulator placement or your particular approach to kyphoplasty. You will do the procedure with a higher degree of accuracy when a light is shined upon you. And you're going to be able to measure the benefits of what you do very accurately. So this, the different clinical modules of registry that have been done in the state of Washington are down at the bottom, and what you find is the data platform is very similar for all of them. The specific metrics arising out of the treatment or out of the patient's diagnosis, process of care metrics may differ, but mostly everybody wants to know how much pain relief do you get and how much functional improvement do you get. And particularly our purchasers want to know that their patients get pain relief and they return to their work, and one of their functional improvement metrics is you got to return to work. This is how the Hawthorne effect works. So this is general surgery. This is a technique of surgical care called a colon resection or colectomy, left colon resection, left colectomy. And the simple question was asked for all the surgeons enrolled, which was in 57 hospitals across this state. They only asked the question, do you leak test your colon anastomosis? And the majority, in 2005, the majority did not. And each year they just asked that question again. They didn't say you should, you shouldn't. If you don't, we won't, your insurance company will, if you don't, we'll report. No, we just said, do you, yes or no? And what they also reported was the adverse events associated with that surgery. Did you end up back in the hospital with peritonitis? Did you have an ICU stay? Did you have a morbidity or mortality? That's all they asked. And lo and behold, they present the literature to the enrolled physicians. Over the course of time, the physicians changed their behaviors. And now all physicians doing colon surgery in the state of Washington, when the anastomosis is repaired, they fill the belly with the abdomen, the incision, with water. There's a rectal tube in place. Air is pressurized to the anastomosis, and if bubbles leaked out, just like your tire when you were a kid and you had to patch the perforation in your tire, you patched it, you put it in a sink of water, you look for bubbles. If you got bubbles, you got to redo the patch. If you have bubbles on your anastomosis leak test, you are in the operating room to fix it, and you fix it right now. And so you don't get readmitted to the hospital. Your abdomen does not get re-explored. You do not get readmitted to the emergency room, and you do not have an ICU stay. And the cost of over $50 million per year, multiplied by years, is saved to the healthcare system. So the registry is a way of doing health outcomes for populations, and it helps discern what works and what doesn't work. You can change patient behavior. So this is a slide of patient behavior in spine surgery, and the simple metric was, do you operate on patients who smoke, and do you not operate on patients who smoke? And what you see is physicians reacting to the fact that there's a tripling of failure rate for spine fusion if you smoke. So physicians say, well, I won't operate on you until you discontinue your nicotine addiction. And you can do this by cohort, you can do this by year, you can just do it overall. And you see that the data shows you're changing physician behavior in the earlier slide, you're changing patient behavior in this slide. And that's all through the Hawthorne effect. So spine surgeons know that your readmit rate, your redo revision rate, and you can do the same with this for any metric you wish. You can look at blood glucose, you can look at transfusions, you can look at all of these different ways, and in your practice you could look at patients who are treated for radiculopathy or CRPS, or we're doing spinal cord stimulation for these broad categories. You can break it down and put it in registry. So here's registry for something that you all are trained to do. This is vertebral compression fractures, and they're treated with cement augmentation. And the outcomes of these are dramatic. Now, in this case, the registry is built for a payer. So this is Medicare. Out west, Medicare is, the vendor is Noridian for jurisdictions E and F. So basically everything west of the Mississippi is the way to think about it. And what you see here is there was a debate arising out of two studies that were done in 2009 that were supposedly sham trials. And these studies said that vertebral compression fractures treated with cement augmentation was a waste of time and money. And so the payer, the client, came to a registry expert group and asked that a registry database be built around evidence of the procedure so that they could make a coverage determination. And essentially what the registry demonstrates, this is 700 plus patients. The patient's pain dramatically dropped with the cement augmentation. The patient's function dramatically improved. So a high score on this means you can't get dressed, you can't get in and out of bed, you can't self-hygiene, you can't walk. So the higher your score, the more questions, there are 24 questions, the more questions you answered, yes, I can't do this. And there is a dramatic improvement in the pain, and there's a dramatic improvement in the function. So the client, who is a Medicare vendor, decides that this is an impactful, significantly important treatment that must be reimbursed, and the registry improved and made straight the avenue for authorization and reimbursement. So the payer gained benefit. Now it knows that I definitely am going to cover this. The physician gained benefit. This is an easy, straightforward way to get the patient authorized and get the reimbursement provided. The patient significantly benefited. Those are dramatic improvements in pain. Those are dramatic improvements in function. So population research, rather than product-specific research or randomized controlled trials, can give huge insights to the important stakeholders. And it's something that your practice lifespans will be involved in registry-type research. I wonder, Lee, are you still back there? I think what happens if I use the pointer, it burns up the battery. So have you got the other, yes, recharge the battery. I think that's what happens. This is the second time it's done this.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. So registries can be hugely impactful, and you all are sitting on the very edge of an enormous landscape that would, pain management, pain treatments, that would benefit immeasurably from the use of registry. You have great variations in treatment. Not all variations are beneficial. So you can eliminate the unbeneficial variations and maximize the beneficial variations. You have a huge heterogeneity in patients, all kinds of conditions that feed in, for which you're trying to imagine which treatment would be best. You will not have sufficient N number in your own practice or within your own society to identify the winners and losers. And registry rapidly gets you to high N numbers where trends are established and treatments definitely segregate out as winners and not so beneficial alternatives. So it's hugely impactful to enroll in and participate in registry because your insights come rapidly as the numbers gain power. They're scalable. They make you capable of incredibly powerful analytics. They're hugely persuasive to the other stakeholders in medicine who are looking to you for guidance around what works and what doesn't work. The data is anonymized and aggregated so you can see how you compare to others, and if you see others doing something better than you, it's an easy method to get a hold of the leaders and what is the difference between what they are doing and what you are doing. This is an unintended consequence. The intended consequence is to tell you what works and what doesn't work, what is safe, what is effective, what is beneficial. The unintended consequence is there is huge savings. I'm just going to have you focus in on, this is healthcare utilization for little old ladies with vertebral compression fractures. And what you'll notice is in the prompt and efficient treatment category, they are profoundly painful and significantly improved with the treatment. Their baseline pain starts off horribly bad. It's 0 to 10 and they're at an 8. Their immediate improvement occurs and it sustains over time. This is 6 months of the patient not being treated. So the patient is cycling back to the emergency room, getting admitted, pain management, then sent to a SNF, then gets back home, profoundly painful, back into the ER. And notice that with 6 months of persisting pain and misery, the cost triples, the condition remains as painful, and the benefit of treatment is the same. So you are still going to have success even though you've waited. The waiting has only achieved 2 things. You've achieved misery for the patient, and you've achieved cost, healthcare utilization, cost for the system, but you still achieve benefit, so the cement augmentation still works. So for a payer, remember this was a payer registry, it tells them you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars wasting time. The minute that patient shows up for her fracture, treat the fracture now, and you will save hundreds of millions of dollars. Unintended consequence, you thought you were building the registry for coverage, evidence for coverage and authorization. What you end up finding out is you save by expediting proper care. And the registry proved the proper care. The tools that do this are real-time, modern, touch the patient electronically. Data is gathered outside the physician's office because it's a better way to do it. You can end up with significant capability. This is JAMA surgery March of this year. It's an original article, and what that means is it's data that has not been reported in the US in the past. So it's the first time you've seen it. This is a calculator that takes spine fusion patients and predicts what will happen to them. And what you see is there are demographic pieces to it, age, sex. There are insurance types, because it makes a difference which insurance you have. It affects your outcome. There are risk factors. Are you smoking? Are you using narcotics? There are characteristics. Is this a virgin surgery? Is this a revision surgery? You let patient primary outcomes measures, baseline pain level, baseline function level, enter into it, and it will predict the likelihood of success. So a 45-year-old male, female, 45-year-old female with LNI who is currently a smoker, is on narcotics and has failed prior surgery with a pain score of 5. If you operate on, you have the 13% likelihood that you're going to help that patient. And you have a 87% likelihood that this is going to go seriously wrong. You want that kind of capability for your subspecialty practice. And Registry delivers that kind of capability because it identifies the important metrics, it identifies the important characteristics, and it has sufficient power that it can establish statistical significance and predictability, which you will never achieve in your private practices or group practice or health system practice. So Registry is hugely impactful. It's a validated tool that's significantly beneficial. And it achieves the goal that population medicine is trying to achieve. If your goals are to raise all boats, improve the lot of all stakeholders, different from a perspective of I want to build my practice, I want to, which are noble things to do. But if you improve the lot of stakeholders as well, then when you sleep at night, you have allies who are trying to achieve your goal as well as you. And when you awaken during the day, you have partners who want to do what you are equally trying to do. And that is a different view of the world. And it is a view of the world that is real time and it changes as the inputs come in. And what you're able to do is collaborate, you measure what's important, and always improve whatever you measure. And you will demonstrate to all of those stakeholders real world outcomes instead of that biased ridiculousness of sham trial, those two Bookbinder and Colmy's articles about kyphoplasty, but they're in all fields. You'll have ridiculous articles of foolishness in all fields. And if you do this process, not only does it work, but you continue to do it throughout your practice life. Any questions? Fire away.
So, well, thank you for this presentation. So I like registries because it does show, what works. But on the flip side, I didn't think about what it shows, what doesn't work. You said
that's correct.
2% chance.
Yeah.
Does that mean when formulating a registry that you're not putting limitations on, say you mentioned variation within how physicians practice. So for vertebral augmentation, someone may treat, when there's only a pain score of 2, but they treat anyways, and then it goes from a 2 to a 1, and can throw off the data.
Yep.
So does that mean you're not putting limitations on physicians saying, just send what you have, even if it's a 2 and you're still doing it, send it in, and then you show it doesn't work?
So now that's where physicians participate in registry metrics. All of us know that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if someone comes in with a pain level of 2, which is roughly, I bruised my shin walking around to the men's room at midnight without a light on, you're not going to do much about that. So what the physicians do is they set criteria for appropriateness. So you have to have a fracture. So we'll stay on vertebral compression fracture because this is where Colmus and Bookbinder got into trouble. They said the presence of vertebral compression fracture on X-ray. Well, we all know that if you're 87 years old, I'll bet a nickel you've got a vertebral compression fracture, and it may have happened a decade and a half ago, but Colmus and Bookbinder didn't do that. So in the registry, we said, well, it had to be a new vertebral compression fracture, and you had to localize the pain that the patient has to so you had to put a marker, localizing X-ray it's called, because we also know 85-year-old females also have spondylolisthesis, and that hurts. So physicians identify the important metrics that qualify the diagnosis. They identify the diagnosis. And for you all, you have a broad range of diagnoses. So in registry work, you would make the definitions for each of those. You'd make the definitions for each of the treatments. And you'd make the definitions for how you are measuring their baseline pain function and each of the time points following. And then you let everybody in who matches the criteria. And what you find is it really helps purify what it is you're looking at. You see all of the heterogeneity of the way patients present. So you'll find those characteristics that work beautifully for spinal cord stimulation. You'll find those characteristics that are a nightmare. And you'll be able to relay that information back to your colleagues. And rapidly, patient improvement skyrockets. And it's across a huge landscape of patients. So you're not only helping the patients in your practice, you're helping the patients across the entire landscape of where the registry is deployed. Yes, please.
So do registries already exist for all of the technologies and implants that we're using?
No. That's why young, bright minds like the ones sitting in this room or the ones depicted, but there are examples of registries which have proven the benefits. So that's why at the bottom of one of those slides you saw that there was urology, there was vascular, there was spine, there was bariatric, there's general. So the example is there. The implementation often starts with a group of young motivated and then spreads to their associated societies so that you get your N numbers up. And its secondary unintended consequences, it helps protect the revenue streams with data that prove the effectiveness of the proposed treatment, which payers are always looking to chop off.
Are there any chronic pain registries?
Chronic pain registries, I would venture no. But isolated examples of registry for tighter diagnostics or joint registries for orthopedics, spine registries for both spine surgeons and neurosurgical and orthopedic spine surgeons, vertebral compression fracture registry for those who take care of the osteoporotic. So there are examples, and spinal cord stimulation registry is in its infancy, but it is a truly deserving landscape for registry enrollment. Hugely impactful.